Hello, and Delawande. I'm Willaxum Hewitt, Bill Helene, and this is Vibe Up Against Child Abuse, formerly known and started as Grandparents' Voices. Today we are looking at the weaponizing of children, when parents turn children into weapons, and everybody loses. There's no way to say that when children are used to hurt each other, and it becomes a game, it becomes a very, very harsh game. And if we don't understand the deeper root of what these games are all about, as we can see in this article, and this comes from The Conversation, and when parents turn children into weapons, everybody loses. It was published in 2022. So domestic abuse can involve one parent using a child as a weapon against the other parent, which harms the child in an immense way. The research done in this has identified how the dynamics play out and examines the damage. And this is speaking in the USA, of course. So the numbers would be a little bit lower, or quite a bit lower in Canada because of population. There's approximately 5.7 million cases of domestic abuse in the U.S. each year, and that's just the reported ones. And some of those mothers and fathers use children to manipulate and harm the other parent. This behavior can include directly pressuring the child to spy on the abused parent or threatening the abused parent that they will never see the child again if they leave the relationship. Or it can be turned around, of course, in the direction of grandparents as well, which is my main focus, is speaking with the voice of the grandparents for grandchildren's rights and grandchildren's protection and safety. Another way of a parent using a child as a weapon involves turning the child against the other parent. And in this case, the abuser makes the child believe the other parent never loved them. How cruel. Abandon them, or is dangerous and unsafe to be around. In this way, the abuser corrupts the child's reality, even convincing the child that the abuser is the victim of abuse. The outcome of this process is what psychologists like this person call parental alienation. The child feels betrayed, hurt, and very angry towards the alienated parent. Much like a spurned lover, but worse because it involves a parent the child had a primary attachment to, and who comprises half of their identity. What happens next is a cascade of losses associated with the great harm to children. And I want to focus a little bit more on this primary attachment to and who comprises half of their identity, when looking at the importance of two parents who co-created a beautiful human being. This is something I believe is not brought into the light of our lives enough in society. It seems that children can be put into a secondary realm of existence when it comes to the family unit. So the children are a little more protected in a family system that's not broken. So with a mother and a father raising their children and unfortunately not having a good balanced approach in how they deal with their family programs and looking at what kind of upbringing we all have had. And when we choose a mate and procreate, we blend all of these things together, but rarely do people ever work this out or plan this out in a way where they're in agreement of how they're going to raise their children. I know that wasn't at all a part of my life and my commitment to becoming a father with the mother of my children. We just felt that because we had applied ourselves into a more Christian lifestyle and not partying and leading that unhealthy lifestyle, that God and Jesus would give us a lot more grounding and guidance. And in a sense, that was true, at least for myself. I like to, research. I want to look at how those life improvements can be implemented in my lifestyle and redeveloping who I am as a human being. And as difficult as it was, because of a lot of childhood trauma and a lot of ego problems and addiction problems, it changed the whole intention of raising our beautiful family, our beautiful children into a balanced, loving home. So taking that into account, that we move ahead as parents, co-creators, I want to focus on the value of those beautiful children. How we have committed ourselves to being parents and co-creators. Being a co-creator is a connection to what is spoken of as, that powerful thing of what God's teachings are, or what comes from the Bible, or what from our ancestral teachings, and looking at, well, we are co-creators, but that was never made clear to me at all. It was never in a teaching in my life at all till a few years ago, when I really came to the comprehension of my own God self, and looking at being able to rise up into my own so-called Christos or Christ consciousness, and looking at the impression that made to me, not only from the teachings of the Bible, but all my good teachers, my great teachers, matriarchs, and other teachers from books and programs that I have observed and taken good ingredients from. So I am a co-creator. You are a co-creator if you have children. And you have created something pretty incredible. Take all of the elements, take all of the substance of a human being from the time of conception, the intention of the conception. Hopefully at that time it was the great intention. If it wasn't, that's okay too. It's all about the fact that we made this happen. We co-created a human being, a little human being. Not the child's fault, not that little being's fault if it wasn't intentional. But hopefully you don't bring that impression into your children's lives. I don't know how one of my children, my youngest children, was told that she was a mistake, or that she wasn't planned. It's just the way it was. My wife and I at the time had planned to have a couple children, but it was never really established in a way where we were very careful about birth control. We thought we were being careful, or somebody did, but the miracle happened again. And that was a beautiful thing of acceptance. The experience was, I wanted to have 10 children at one time. But realistically, coming into whether two people are going to be able to handle being parents on a very mature level, or on a very loving and respectful level, that's the key thing, and what contributes to that. And this is definitely something for another program, I'm sure. But to look at, again, I just want to come back to that we are co-creators of beautiful creatures. And it's a shame, it's a damn awful travesty, whatever you want to call the fact that, so many children are used and abused in parental ego problems and parental selfishness, and everything that comes out of a failed relationship, blaming and being able to accept that they can actually use their children to try to hurt the other person. I blame you for this, you blame me for that, it's really your fault. Well, I abandoned my children. Yeah, that was my fault. Whatever the ingredients of my traumas and my misdirections and my habits, my bad habits from addictions, sexual addictions, drugs, alcohol, ego from my father, just whatever I was brought up in my own traumas from my childhood carries on. And God and Jesus and other influences, good examples, can only do so much for us along the way in our busy lives. But come back to how valuable your children are, how beautiful they are, and look at the fact that you are the one that's responsible, especially when you become a grandparent like myself, to be able to look at what can happen in the future. Take it into account because it's coming. It's coming. If you're being selfish and you're using your child to abuse the other person and you're not seeing it, you're not accepting that, that this isn't okay, well, I think it's just something that it's unfortunate it's not a greater law or rule in our system. If we get beyond the fact that the system makes so much money off of us as broken families, divorced, fighting, and, taking things into the court, who's winning? Who's benefiting? Is it the children? They're supposed to be the focus, right? So here again, the outcome of this process, the psychologists say, parental alienation. So the child feels betrayed, hurt, and very angry towards the alienated parent, much like a spurned lover, but worse because it involves the parent the child had a primary attachment to and comprises half their identity, coming into now a number of different outstanding features in this whole journey, this unfortunate journey in a children's life. When a loss of self-confidence takes place, point number one, when this happens, researchers in this field call this weaponizing a child. The child often loses trust in their own memories or experience with the abused parent because it's at odds with what the abuser is leading them to believe, and keep that whole abuser terminology clarified. You can't get around it. If you're using your child for anything or you're abusing them, it's abuse. It really is, and it's not supposed to be acceptable. It's supposed to be against the law that you abuse a child in any way, shape, or form. Get that into your conscience, please. It's so important to see the value of their feelings and their future. Many adults who were alienated from a parent as a child report feeling helpless and disconnected from their emotions and having problems trusting other people, especially going into their own relationships with the opposite sex or whatever mate they choose, gender. And looking at my own experience, my mother and father never divorced. My dad abandoned us at times. He was went away fishing for almost 3 years and left my mom to raise us. But we didn't know if he was coming back or not. It just seemed like, he was gone. We had to go and track him down. But as a fisherman and living apart, my dad was apart from us, up to 5 and 6 months out of the year, sometimes longer, depending on what fishing season was coming up. So, probably up to 8 months out of the year, we didn't have a father around. My mom filled those responsibilities and did an amazing job. Amazing Viking warrior she still is. And looking at how we get caught up in blaming the other person. Well, I didn't feel the actual abandonment of my father because my mother really didn't use that situation. She didn't use that situation to make us feel bad or angry towards my dad until after he died. Then all the truth came out. He wasn't around much, but my mom stayed faithful and committed and raised us the best she could. Amazing lady. So number 2, the loss of innocence. The abusive parent can take away the child's innocence by exposing them to ideas and behaviors that are not age appropriate or are in fact not appropriate at all. The abuser may ask a child to make an adult-level decision, such as choosing whether to have a relationship with the other parent. Abusive parents also can often neglect the developmental needs of the child, such as encouraging independence and sometimes making a child care for the needs of the parent. So big responsibilities. I saw that in my older brother, where my dad, whenever he would leave to go fishing or go somewhere for a certain amount of time, would say, "You're the man of the house now, son." And my brother took it very seriously. It was a big responsibility that affected him a lot in his life's journey, and it wasn't easy for him to carry that as a child. But he turned out to be a really great guy. I love my brother Henry. Support evidence-based journalism. There's support programs that we can donate to that are great causes. Number 3, loss of parental connection. When a child becomes alienated from a parent, they begin to reject half their identity because they are hurt and angry. It is too painful to acknowledge that connection. The child also rejects the important parental bond that the abused parent had provided. This loss of connection and sense of shared identity has substantial short and long-term negative effects, such as unresolved grief and low self-esteem. So that parental connection, again, I've seen it so much, not only in my own life and my own actions, and looking at when my children were mostly spending their time living with their mother. It was very difficult for me because I was still running away from my own addictions and covering things up and really not facing the important commitments in my life. My addictions kept me separated from the reality of the importance of my children and family. So that loss of parental connection is, again, the children they adapt into it because they see two parents acting like idiots and not respectful adults who brought them into the world. Number 4, loss of wider family links. Of course, broken families just keep breaking things up and breaking things apart, and people are choosing sides. As a child, we'll read this again, as the child becomes more distant from the abused parent, the child also can lose relationships with extended family and social networks. The child is deprived of the types of experience and opportunities that these related individuals can provide, such as social support or professional opportunities possible through their social networks. So as a grandparent, because back to my focus in what I'm teaching here and sharing with you and what I've been learning online and by example, that when our children are raising their own children, again, they're raised by us. We set the example for them. And so looking at where this whole extended family program comes in and connects with the children's lives, it's like myself being available to my grandchildren as long as I'm not interfering with any of my children's ways of raising their children or their lifestyle. Definitely, I'm very guilty of not carrying on good lifestyle in the past, but certainly as through my own experiences, I want to, of course, try to bring the better part of what I've learned into protecting grandchildren or offering good advice to my children, or should be by example first. But also the tough part is when it involves grandchildren as well. So that's what happens to the broken family, where a lot of issues, abandonment issues, and all these issues that could be fueled by somebody still angry from the past and not being able to deal with the abandonment process in a healing way. So it doesn't matter whether some people will apologize for their mistakes and some will forgive and some won't. But it's a matter of looking at, it happens in many families where the broken families come back and parents will keep carrying on this weaponizing program by bad-mouthing the other parent or speaking disrespectfully in other ways, and just not being respectful about the fact that, hey, it didn't work out. And as much as we all wish that we could have done things the right way, there's no excuse for it now. There's no excuse for the abuse that takes place using children. So that's why we're focusing on this today, and why I wanted to bring out my own experiences, that I wish I could have done things better, but here I am now, not looking at the past, but taking on what I've learned now and trying to work at healing things. I might not be doing them exactly the way my children want me to, but it's another learning experience as well. The child is deprived of the types of experiences and opportunities. So looking at the related individuals, it's like my own connections to other people in my new relationship. So I've been married twice, and been in a number of relationships where there was always conflict. The ex never got along with the new, and this just carried on to the children. And then blended families bring other children into it. So, and then there's grandparents, and there's connections to other friends who are influential and supportive in your children's lives. And so all these things are broken apart as well. So it affects a lot of people. And I appreciate other people asking, and then, giving me words of encouragement, and, the challenges that I've gone through, or that I'm going through in family with children and grandchildren. So we have all these connections, and if the other parent isn't supportive or wanting to keep the family connected one way or another, and everybody, who's connected to the children becomes part of the family. This is the tribal system. So I look at things on an Aboriginal cultural level as well, and my upbringing is different from my past mates or my mother of my children's. Her culture different from mine, but my Aboriginal culture has been a big part of my life. So I've been teaching that ever since my children were born, and in my grandchildren's lives as well. So I lead a fairly connected cultural life, connected to my ancestral teachings and my ancestors through practices of traditional ceremonies and songs and stories. That's always been a part of my children's and grandchildren's life that I share with them. So moving on to number 5 here, loss of social connection. Some abusers socially isolate their children, homeschooling them, limiting their friendships, or even relocating or abducting them to another province or state or whatever country. When that happens, the child can lose all their former social, educational, recreational, and cultural connections. Unable to grieve the loss of the alienated parent openly because the abusive alliance they have formed with the abusive parent. The children often suffer alone. So there's been very little opportunities for children to reach out. And seeing what happens to so many children who are being isolated from the other parent, or isolated from the grandparents, the children are cut off and really have a difficult time making a connection. Whatever parent has the children won't allow them to make phone calls. If that parent has guardianship rights over the children, or living in another country, as this article is speaking of, then the other parent or grandparents are just, a fading memory. And maybe someday they'll come back into the children's lives, or the children will be able to get access to communication with them and be able to make a reconnection with them. And this happens a lot. Grandchildren will move. Once they get old enough, they'll actually go and live with the other parent to escape the abusive, punishing parent, or they'll go to live with a grandparent or other relative. It's an open thing to when the children grow up enough to be able to leave the abusive parent's realm. So that whole suffering, children missing the other parents or missing the other connection to the family or culture, it's really, again, it's forms of trauma, deep-rooted trauma in children. And that's one thing, again, that selfish people don't see as the sufferings of others when they're either caught up in their addictions or they just have issues that they cannot heal and develop in a way where they care about how it's affecting their children. So what's to be done? Well, that's the big question here. To friends and relatives, a situation in which children are weaponized can be confusing or even appear as the reverse of what it actually, what's happening. Outsiders might not recognize the role of the abuser and think that the abused parent is in fact rejecting the child or it's somehow otherwise at fault. But those closely connected outsiders are the people best positioned to help. The family break its cycles of violence. The family break its cycle of violence and find ways to protect the children. When they blame the wrong parent for the abuse, the child continues to suffer. Even mental health. So a lot of this is so deep-rooted. Even mental health professionals don't always evaluate the situation correctly and focus treatment on the child's relationship with the abused parent while ignoring the continued influence of the abuser. So that's the other thing where children will get, they'll be, led to believe, they'll be pretty much brainwashed and retrained to have this deep-rooted anger towards the other parent, which, because they've been cut off from them, they don't know for sure. They don't know the details about whether the other parent really cares or what's actually been going on and how the abusive parent has been covering things up. So when all these realities come out, it's very overpowering and causes even deeper situations to take place. So get rid of that. The most recent national statistics available indicate that there are not significant differences in numbers of men and women who are victims of domestic violence each year. I do not find in my research, this person says, that there are gender differences in the proportion of parents that have their children who have their children weaponized against them by another parent. Unless children are protected from being weaponized against a parent, there will continue to be many family relationships that remain broken. So there's other connections in this article. It's an awesome article just to overview a very, very important topic. And again, the children are important. Very, very important. We co-created them. They're our responsibility. And as grandparents, we also have a responsibility to try to protect them and try to be there for them and hopefully be a place where they can run for safety and love. And when they start to understand the truth, we have to be careful also that, we don't badmouth the other parent, the abuser, but we don't tolerate, if we can, in any way, not tolerate the abuse. And if we know about it and somehow the children are calling for help, then we have to respond. We have to look at all the ways that we can be there in support of those children that are being abused and isolated. So other features on this Vibe Up Against Child Abuse YouTube channel will offer support in many different ways, vibrationally through drum therapy, so to speak, but sharing ways that we can culturally be connected in a way where we can better deal with the stress and also reconnect with some vibrational roots in our life on this challenging journey. So I thank you for joining me and going through this report. And again, it comes from the conversation published in April 25. The author is Jennifer Harmon, and Jennifer is Associate Professor of the Applied Social and Health Psychology in Colorado. So thank you, Jennifer, and I wish you grandparents all the best in your challenging journeys. And be strong, be honorable, and be diligent in protecting the innocent. Thank you. Deutsche.